the day is in the midst of a year-long look at affordable housing in the region. What specifically do you think the legislature should do to help people who can't afford to buy a home or who are struggling to rent an apartment?
Absolutely. Affordable housing has been a really large issue across the state and nation at that fact. But realistically, in my district, we've seen a lot of struggles with affordable housing. Primarily, it's been because it's a game plan that's been mainly only viewed by large-scale developers. What I've been looking at and having conversations across the district about is how we make it easier for small scale in more low density, low traffic areas, and how we work with those in our community who really want to invest in affordable housing but aren't looking to do a 70-unit project. Maybe they're looking at doing 3 or 4. Maybe they're looking at how do I transition what I already have in the rental market into affordable housing. So my focus is really helping those who are already in our community figure out how to invest and give back into the community they already love.
And second question, I know this is something that you've talked about a lot, in your campaign, but again, one we're asking everyone. So Connecticut recently enacted a law designated to provide safeguards against lawsuits for out-of-state patients seeking abortions in Connecticut. And any provider who helps them. Do you support efforts to make Connecticut such a safe haven?
Absolutely. I think it's unfortunate that we're at a point where we need to be doing this, but I fully support women's rights. And when we talk about their ability to come here as a safe harbor, this is one of the best things that we can do to show that not only are we defending all of those inside of our state, but we are going to stand up and lead in the nation and continue to make sure every woman has access to the reproductive health care that they deserve.
And what do you say to your opponent's concerns about, safety implications of expanding who can administer surgical abortions?
Well, I think part of the issue with my opponent on this matter is I think there was a misconception in his head, and the reality is these are individuals who will be properly trained to do this. I have full faith that when our APRNs and our physicians or assistants are trained on any procedure, that they are more than capable and qualified. That does not change whether we're discussing reproductive rights or anything else in the health industry.
And going forward, are you content with the way Connecticut's law is now, both from, codifying Roe v. Wade decades ago and then the recent law passed this summer, or is there anything else you would like to see Connecticut passed in regards to abortion access?
I think the reality is we probably will be moving forward with some more bills. I think as we're watching more and more states make restrictions, I think there's going to be adjustments that come along with that. I am willing to have those discussions as long as it continues to expand and protect women. And that's something that just comes with the nature. When we pass laws, you have to think of it almost as a living document. So as times change, we need to continue to do everything we can in our reproductive protections to continue to ensure that we are protecting everyone no matter what, so that they always have that choice.
And on a financial question, the state surplus has grown to over $4 billion. Do you support the decision to use some of that to lower the state's pension debt, or do you think that more of that should be returned to the taxpayer?
Well, first off, when we talk about pension debt, we have to remember that we do have a bill that passed in 2017. It was a bipartisan bill that did require us to do this. I do think we need to continue to focus on funding our pensions. The reality is this is something that was passed for years where we were not properly funding, and so I do support the fact that we are continuing to properly fund our pensions like we should have been doing.
And to what extent, I guess, with the growing surplus and with the rainy day fund, is there a certain point at which you think, okay, that's enough, we can start spending that down, or kind of how do you think about kind of the size of the surplus or the rainy day fund?
So I think we have to do it in two ways. Right now, we are receiving a large amount of additional federal funding, as most states are. And so I'm not as quick to say, let's spend it all. I want to make sure that we leave ourselves in a fiscal state that can sustain. I don't believe in necessarily spending it all off immediately, but actually looking at how we are long-term fiscally healthy as a state.
And on the topic of climate change, how do you think Connecticut should move forward to address climate change with regards to electric vehicles, wind power, and other clean energy strategies?
Absolutely. So we did pass the Clean Air Act this past session. I was really actually surprised that my opponent voted no on that bill. I think this was a prime example of ways that we can actually make direct impact on climate change. This was something that focused on clean air, and it didn't just pass this funding issue to the towns. Instead, it gave grant funding, so we did something that was good for the environment and didn't just pass it off to towns in an unfunded mandate or anything of that nature. This is something we need to continue to do. The reality is climate change exists, and we do need to accept that and focus on making sure that we leave this planet and this environment for future generations to come.
So what kind of policies, you talked about, that you would have supported the Clean Air Act. What are some policies that I guess you'd like to see going forward? And I know one thing we've been hearing a lot about at the state gubernatorial debate level is kind of carrot versus stick approaches to things. So what do you think, are there any, I guess, ideas you have for climate bills you'd like to see going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to really go back to focusing on recycling. This is something that's really fallen behind. We look at schools that don't currently recycle across our state. We also can look at things when we're talking about the banning of styrofoam and doing so in a long-term out. I'm not saying let's ban it tomorrow. I'm saying let's pass this bill. Let's give our small businesses an ability to have some time to find new packaging and things of that nature so that we're not instantly hitting them with a financial burden either.
And we have a couple election and voting related questions, again, once we're asking all candidates. So first, do you think the 2020 election was conducted fairly and Joe Biden won?
Yes, I do. I not only believe that it was won, I believe our elections are safe. I do recognize I voted for Joe Biden, and I recognize that not only he won in the state of Connecticut, but across our nation.
And do you support early voting and voting by mail initiatives?
Yes, I do. Any opportunity we give individuals the chance to come out and vote is that, to me, that's part of democracy. So when we can expand and give more access to the ballot, that's a win-win for everyone. We've seen claims that this may make elections not safe, and there's no proof of that. And we have seen time and time again in other states that we can, in fact, have early voting and do so in a safe and secure manner.
And so you'll be voting yes on the referendum?
Yes, I will.
Yes on referendum. And you support no excuse absentee voting?
I do.
Okay. And last question for our video here. One, I guess, big cornerstone of your opponent's campaign is the police accountability law. And as a police officer, he has a lot of issues with that and sections he wants to repeal. How do you feel about that law? I guess, what do you like and or dislike about it, and is there anything that you would seek to see repealed or amended?
Absolutely. This past year we did see some amendments to that bill. And this is one of these things of this is a new bill. First and foremost, when I talk with officers, I don't always hear the same concerns that my opponent continues to address day in and day out. What I am hearing, though, is because this is a new bill, we need to give this a couple years and look at the data and see what is occurring. However, most of my opponent's biggest concerns, he even has admitted, for example, when we talk about liability, no one has had that happen since the bill passed. So I don't believe that we need to be focusing every ounce of energy on the police accountability bill. I think we need to instead focus on the things that really directly impact everyone across our district day in and day out right now. And that has to do with budget, funding, and the inability to live in a financial state right now that is secure due to the constant raising of inflation.
And you said, you hear kind of some different things when you talk to officers. What are some of the things that you hear, either just about the police accountability bill or in general when you talk to police officers?
Generally, the mindset is, some of the things I hear vocalist out of my opponent. He vocally is constantly talking about these inability to search vehicles just because they're pulled over. If you pull somebody over because they have a taillight out, he wants the ability to search. Other officers are kind of viewing at, is that necessarily a problem? No. Does it make our job a little more tricky? Maybe, but it's not something that makes them unable to do their job. And I think that's the big difference, is my opponent claims this directly affects their ability to do their job, and by no means is that actually the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.